defamatory accusation from Akron Jackson of The Athletic on his podcast is categorically false. I do not have a sister named Sheila Anderson, nor do I have a sister who reads any form or fashion. I listened to the reported podcast, and I can't believe that Jackson would so recklessly share that story on his platform without checking with me first and verify this false claim. Then it went on to say, I will handle this with appropriate action. Browns writer says sister sent him something. Now, this is what, hold on, let me put up what the New York Post, because the New York Post going to do their due diligence to get right into this thing. I guess this is one of the dudes.
A Cleveland Browns reporter is about to face a lawsuit of a lifetime after spreading lies about Shedeur Sanders. And now Hosea Anderson is threatening appropriate action that could end the Athletic's Zack Jackson's entire career. The New York Post just picked up this explosive story after Jackson went on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show podcast and made defamatory accusations, claiming Anderson's sister sent him harassing messages about Shedeur coverage. But here's the problem. Anderson doesn't have a sister named Sheila Anderson, and she's calling this categorically false reporting that was shared so recklessly without any fact-checking. But here's where this story gets absolutely insane. The alleged message included racist language, calling Jackson a typically white, cowardly boy afraid to deal with the black man. And now, with 10,000 plus people hearing these false accusations on a major podcast, Anderson is preparing legal action that could bring down one of Cleveland's biggest sports shows. This is exactly what we've been warning about. The Cleveland media has been looking spooky from day one with their Shedeur coverage. And now somebody's about to pay the price for spreading lies.
That's when the person indicated they were related to Anderson. Oh, yes, I did not see. So is this him? I think I seen this podcast. Oh, no way. Oh, yes, I did send it twice. Making sure you got the message. The response said, per awful announcement, the fact is that you responded lets me know I hit a nerve. Then it says, I'm surprised you can even read. I'll let my sister know you actually had the balls to reply, but find it odd you haven't responded to Deion Sanders Jr. Typically, white, cowardly boy afraid to do.
Look, I've been telling y'all from day one that these Cleveland Browns reporters have been looking spooky when it comes to covering Shedeur Sanders. I was one of the first people to call this out, saying something wasn't right about how they were handling coverage of number 12. And now we've got a full-blown media scandal that's making national headlines and could result in serious legal consequences. When it comes to Shedeur, you can't be wishy-washy. You can't be doing the fugazi stuff these Cleveland Browns reporters have been doing. I've been telling y'all from Jump Street, they've been looking spooky, it's all been looking a little odd, the things they've been doing. And this right here, this is the culmination of all that dysfunction finally exploding into public view. The New York Post picked up this story, and I'm telling you right now, it is definitely making waves across social media. A lot of people are talking about this, and for good reason. This isn't just some Twitter beef or podcast drama. This is about journalistic integrity, defamation, and potentially career-ending consequences for one of Cleveland's most prominent sports media personalities. Here's what happened, and I want you to pay close attention because the details matter. The Athletic's Zack Jackson went on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show podcast, which, by the way, is a massive platform with like 10,000 people watching live, and made some explosive claims about Hosea Anderson. Now, if you don't know who Hosea Anderson is, she's a Browns reporter who has been one of the few media members in Cleveland actually providing positive coverage of Shedeur Sanders. She's been calling out what she believes to be bias against Deion Sanders' son, which is something I've been doing too. The people in Cleveland have been biased against Shedeur because of who his daddy is, and Anderson has been one of the few willing to speak truth about that. So what did Jackson claim? He said that Hosea Anderson's sister, allegedly named Sheila Anderson, sent him harassing messages about his Shedeur Sanders coverage. And the content of these alleged messages was wild. We're talking about racist, inflammatory language that would be absolutely unacceptable coming from anyone, let alone someone claiming to be related to a professional journalist. But here's where Jackson messed up badly. Here's Hosea Anderson's response, and you need to hear every word of this because it's devastating. This defamatory accusation from Zack Jackson of The Athletic on his podcast is categorically false. I do not have a sister named Sheila Anderson, nor do I have a sister who reached out in any form or fashion. I listened to the reported podcast, and I can't believe that Jackson would so recklessly share that story on his platform without checking with me first and verifying this false claim. Let me repeat that for emphasis. She doesn't have a sister named Sheila Anderson. She doesn't have a sister who reached out to Jackson at all. This entire story that Jackson shared with 10,000 plus people watching live was completely fabricated. And Anderson didn't stop there. She continued, "I will handle this with appropriate action." Appropriate action. Those are lawyer words, y'all. That's the kind of language you use when you're preparing to file a defamation lawsuit. And honestly, she would be completely justified in doing so. When you go on a major platform and make false accusations that damage someone's professional reputation, there are consequences for that. Now let's talk about what Jackson actually said on the podcast, because the alleged messages he shared were absolutely vile. According to Awful Announcing and the New York Post coverage, the message Jackson claimed came from Hosea Anderson's sister included phrases like, "Oh yes, I did send it twice, making sure you got the message. The fact that you responded lets me know I hit a nerve. I'm surprised you can even read. I'll let my sister know you actually had the balls to reply, but find it odd you haven't responded to Deion Sanders Jr. And then, and this is the most damning part, typically white cowardly boy afraid to deal with the black man." Now, if those messages were real, that would be a legitimate story about harassment that a reporter was facing. But they're not real. Anderson is stated categorically that she doesn't have a sister, that no one related to her sent these messages, and that this entire story is false. Now let's talk about the bigger picture here, because this story isn't just about one reporter making a massive mistake. This is about a pattern of problematic coverage surrounding Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland that's been building since draft day. I've been calling out the Cleveland media for being spooky about Shedeur coverage for months. The weird energy, the constant skepticism, the refusal to give him credit when he plays well, the overemphasis on every mistake while ignoring the context of playing behind a terrible offensive line with receivers who can't catch. Hosea Anderson has been one of the few Cleveland media members actually providing balanced, fair coverage of Shedeur. She's been calling out the bias, pointing out when other reporters are being unfair, and giving credit where credit is due. And what happened? She became a target. The fact that someone would create a fake account pretending to be her sister and send inflammatory messages is bad enough. But the fact that a reporter from The Athletic, one of the most respected sports media outlets in the country, would then share those completely unverified messages on a major podcast without doing any fact-checking, that tells you everything you need to know about the state of Cleveland sports media right now. And let's talk about the ultimate Cleveland sports show for a second, because they're implicated in this too. This is a massive platform. Last time I checked, they had like 10,000 people watching live. That's not some small-time podcast. That's a major media operation with serious reach and influence. So when Zack Jackson goes on that show and shares false, defamatory information about another journalist, that platform bears some responsibility for amplifying that content. Did they do any fact-checking before the show? Did they follow up after Anderson's response? Did they issue any kind of correction or apology? Because here's the thing. If this lady is telling the truth, and all the evidence suggests she is, and they put that false accusation out there to 10,000 plus people, that's serious.
That's not just bad journalism, that's potentially actionable defamation. And I don't know how much longer the Ultimate Cleveland Browns podcast can survive if they don't handle this appropriately.
This is damaging, bro. Very, very damaging. I just got to be honest. As a journalist, as somebody in the game, in the field, this is the kind of mistake that can end careers and destroy reputations. Not just Jackson's reputation, but the reputation of The Athletic, the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, and frankly, Cleveland sports media as a whole. Because here's what happens when stuff like this goes unchecked. It creates an environment where lies and misinformation spread freely, where journalists don't feel the need to verify their sources, where personal vendettas and biases can masquerade as reporting. And the people who suffer are the subjects of that bad journalism. In this case, Shedeur Sanders and Hosea Anderson. Think about what Shedeur has had to deal with in Cleveland. He was drafted against his GM's wishes. He was buried on the depth chart without getting first-team reps. He's been playing in a high school offense that makes evaluation impossible. His coaching staff has protected underperforming veterans while putting all the pressure on him. And on top of all of that, he's had to deal with media coverage that's been skeptical, unfair, and in some cases actively hostile toward him. Hosea Anderson recognized that bias and spoke out about it. She provided fair coverage when others wouldn't. She called out the double standards. And what did she get for her trouble? She became the target of false accusations that questioned her professionalism and integrity, accusations that were amplified by supposedly credible media outlets. That's why Anderson's response is so important. When she says, "I will handle this with appropriate action," she's not just defending herself. She's drawing a line in the sand and saying that journalists who spread false information will face consequences. That's necessary. That's how you maintain standards in an industry that's increasingly plagued by hot takes, clickbait, and careless reporting. And let's be clear about something. If Anderson does pursue legal action, and she absolutely should, she's got a strong case. Defamation law is pretty clear. If someone makes false statements about you that damage your reputation, and they do so with negligence or actual malice, you can sue them. And in this case, we have false statements. Anderson doesn't have a sister who sent those messages. Damage to reputation, accusations of being associated with racist, harassing behavior. Negligence, Jackson failed to verify the information before sharing it publicly. And publication to third parties, shared on a podcast with 10,000 plus viewers. That's textbook defamation. And if The Athletic and the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show don't take immediate action to correct the record and apologize, they could find themselves named in a lawsuit alongside Jackson. Now, I want to circle back to why this matters for Shedeur specifically, because at the heart of this entire mess is the question of fair media coverage and journalistic integrity when it comes to Deion Sanders' son. The reason Anderson became a target is because she refused to participate in the pile-on. She refused to be part of the Cleveland media ecosystem that seemed determined to prove Shedeur wasn't good enough, that he only got drafted because of his name, that he didn't deserve a fair shot. And when you're a journalist who goes against the prevailing narrative in your market, you become a target. Other media members don't like it. Fans who want to believe the negative narrative don't like it. And apparently some people dislike it enough that they'll create fake accounts and send inflammatory messages pretending to be your family members. But here's what those people didn't count on: receipts. In 2024, you can't just make stuff up and expect to get away with it. Everything is documented. Everything can be verified. And when you lie, you will get caught. Zack Jackson is learning that lesson the hard way right now. He took a shortcut. He wanted a dramatic story for the podcast. He wanted to paint Anderson as someone whose family was sending him harassing messages. He didn't bother to verify the information. And now he's facing potential legal action that could destroy his career. The Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show is learning that lesson too. When you give someone a platform to spread false information, you share in the responsibility for that misinformation. And when the person being defamed threatens legal action, you can't just pretend it didn't happen. And Cleveland sports media as a whole is learning that the rest of the country is watching. When the New York Post picks up your internal drama, when awful announcing covers your defamation scandal, when people across the sports media landscape are talking about your failures, that's when you know you've crossed a line. Here's the bottom line. Hosea Anderson deserves better. Shedeur Sanders deserves better. And Cleveland sports fans deserve better than media members who spread false information without doing basic fact-checking. This is why I've been saying from day one that the Cleveland media situation was looking spooky. This is why I've been hesitant to collaborate with people in that market. Because when the standards are this low, when the verification processes are this weak, when journalists can go on major platforms and spread completely false information without immediate consequences, that's not a media ecosystem I want to be part of. But you know what? This might be the wake-up call that Cleveland sports media needs. Because when lawyers get involved, when lawsuits get filed, when careers start getting destroyed, that's when people start taking journalistic standards seriously again. Hosea Anderson said she will handle this with appropriate action. I believe her. And I think that appropriate action is going to send a message, not just to Zack Jackson, but to every sports media member who thinks they can play fast and loose with the facts when it comes to covering controversial subjects like Shedeur Sanders. The era of sloppy journalism and unverified stories is over. The receipts are coming, and the people who've been spreading lies are about to find out that there are real consequences for their actions. So here's my question for y'all in the comments. Should Hosea Anderson pursue a full defamation lawsuit against Zack Jackson and The Athletic? Or is the public embarrassment and professional damage to Jackson's reputation enough punishment? And more importantly, how many other Cleveland media members have been spreading unverified stories and lies about Shedeur Sanders that just haven't been exposed yet? Because if this is what we're catching in public, imagine what's being said in private. Drop your thoughts below, and if you're tired of seeing dishonest journalism and false narratives about Shedeur Sanders, smash that subscribe button because we're going to keep calling out the BS until Cleveland media finally starts doing their jobs with integrity. This is just the beginning. More receipts are coming, and we're going to be here to expose every lie. Let's talk about it.